Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I want to share with you a mechanic that I've created to spice up the environmental effects of your combat encounters, and it can be used with literally any type of tabletop RPG. Okay, so it's very simple mechanic with two steps. So I'm going to start by going over those two steps, and then I'm going to elaborate more on maybe some ways I've used this to give you some ideas of how you could implement this at your table. So the first step is very simple. On your battle map, you just want to label one row, okay, with numbers somewhere in the same amount of faces you have on a die. So for example, on this one, I used 20, 1 through 20. There are 20 faces on the side of a 20-sided die. So I put numbers 1 through 20, one in each box from one end to the other. Now I did that on this end, okay, and on a y-axis and on an x-axis. So what you're going to be doing is, fundamentally, you're creating a battleship mechanic, like the old board game.
B3. You sunk my battleship.
I was inspired to create this when I was teaching algebra, and I thought, oh, x, y axis, and then we're moving over and up. And if you guys remember those old x, y axis connect the dots they used to give you, where you'd have to find, okay, x2, y3, and then you connect all the dots and it would make a picture on a graph. Well, I was inspired by that, and I thought, how can I make this a Dungeons and Dragons mechanic? So on the x-axis, I labeled 1 through 20. On the y-axis, I labeled 1 through 20. Now, this will depend on the size of the image on your battle map. So if it is a small house, maybe it's a 6x6. Maybe it's a 6x4. The die do not necessarily have to be the same on the x and y axis. The idea here is that you're going to be working this mechanic like Battleship, like you're playing the game Battleship. So keeping that in mind, you can go to your second step, which is the implementation. And one of the things I always try to do in my combat encounters is create an environmental effect. Now, that doesn't always necessarily mean that there is something mechanically happening. Sometimes that means that, I just describe the environment, or I describe something that's happening in the setting so that it gives the players more engagement with their surroundings, right? But there are many times where I want the environment to do something. And in the example I've provided to show you steps 1 and 2, okay, I have this giant gelatinous ooze that's in a pit. Well, this pit shoots ooze out of it, and one of the things I wanted to do in this combat encounter was make it a little deadlier by having bits of ooze that are acidic shoot out of this pit and potentially hit both allies and enemies. Okay? And again, it works like a battleship mechanic. So at the end of the round, I will roll for the environment. Or many times what I'll do is I'll have the players roll for the environment. I'll say, you sitting over here, my buddy Nick, perhaps. I'll say, Nick, you go ahead, roll one. Mike, you roll the other. And so one person rolls the x-axis, one person rolls the y-axis. It gives the players a sense of ownership. And then, we're all kind of waiting for this random encounter that could be good or bad, to affect the combat encounter in some way, shape, or form. Now, many times it ends up with nothing happening, right? It'll land somewhere on the map that is meaningless, but the tension creates something in your combat encounter that can really add a lot of enjoyment for the players at your table. So that's what I like about it the most, is even when it's not necessarily deadly or lethal, if that's not what you're going for, it is engaging. And that sense of, oh boy, here we come to the environmental effect, And so you can get creative with this. And moving on to how you might want to use this, here are some ideas of things that I've thought about, okay? So creating areas of effect. You might want to roll a d20, and then maybe you roll like a d4, right? And you can see if there's an area of effect for a size of something in one axis. Another thing you might want to do is have environmental effects in between turns if it's particularly volatile. Maybe you're by a volcano and that sucker's blowing hard, ready to go, lava spewing everywhere. It's really like Lord of the Rings, end of Return of the King. And so, you have all this stuff spewing everywhere, and the players are in mortal danger of being hit by lava. So you're rolling in between turns. Another thing I've done is I've used it for encounters that are not exactly monsters. So I'll give you an example. I had a portal opening up on top, and this dragon had an ability, to make a swipe attack. And it couldn't see through the portal because it was so big. So it just kind of put its hand through the hole, like dipping its hand into a cookie jar. And it was trying to grapple something and just reach for it. So I would roll the XY axis, and I would do it to see what the range was. And if you were within the range of that grapple, like maybe it had a 10-foot range of the point, so anything within 10 feet of the point, it had the opportunity to try and grapple a creature. So it created this huge amount of tension that was very, very randomized. And I think that this is a great mechanic. It's very simple to use, and what I like the most about it is that it adds another layer to your combat encounters to engage your players with something that's going on more than, I come up to my attack, my turn is done,
Excellent.
next, and then waiting 10 minutes. There's an additional point in the initiative where the player is hopefully excited to see what's going to happen. It's not just my turn, it's now the environment's turn, and that can go one way or the other. So let's wait and see what happens here. I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you're able to use it in your own tabletop RPGs. Just so you know, full disclosure, I have used this mostly with Dungeons & Dragons and other D20 systems in the past. But I think that, as long as you have multiple polyhedral dice at your disposal, regardless of the system you're playing, this should function just fine. Thanks again for joining me and checking this mechanic out. Please let me know if this works out, or even if you have any cool changes that you've made to it or adjustments that worked out really well at your table. I would love to hear them in the comments below. Thanks as always, and I'll see you next time.
Has come to take the city by storm, because he cares about making things fair. So Dr. Weaver, beware, the demon is here.